You know, I'm right. The podcast that uncovers the origin stories of some of the biggest names in sports, media, entertainment, and so much more. Nick Durst here, along with Joe Calabrese. And Joe, we're very excited for our guest today. Of course, we heard so many times on the radio that he came up in the same system as Mike Francesa, but I know you, Joe, huge Jets fan. This is very exciting for you because it's undisputable for you. At worst, we're talking about the second best GM in the history of the franchise of your cursed Jets.
Yeah, absolutely. You can make a debate that he's the number one general manager in the history of the Jets. But yes, former general manager of the New York Jets. He also served as the executive vice president of football operations for the Miami Dolphins. He's got extensive periods working multiple decades as an NFL executive. Most recently, he founded the 33rd team, and he's been on ESPN as a front office insider since 2019. We're very happy to have him on. We're very fortunate to have him on. We welcome Mike Tannenbaum to the show. Mike, morning. Welcome. How are you doing today?
Great. Good to be with you, Nick and Joe.
Mike, thanks for joining us. And we're looking back here at your career and all the things you've accomplished. It all started when you received your accounting degree from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. At that time, when you were going to college, was anything with sports even on your mind, or are you thinking, let me just go into the accounting field and see what could happen here?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, something I talk to young people all the time. Choose a job you love. You never work a day in your life. And it's about passion. You know, the best plumber in our country loves being a plumber. The best teacher in our country loves being a teacher. And you got to find your passion. And for me, when I graduated UMass, I was an unpaid intern for the Pittsfield Mets and put cheese on the nachos, rake the infield. And that's sort of like I knew that's what I wanted to do with my career.
So you studied sports law at Tulane, and a dear friend of ours, David Meltzer, also is a Tulane grad. So when you got there, you decided to study sports law. Where did you want to take your career from that point on? What was the end game that you saw once you started going to Tulane?
I wanted to be a GM in the NFL. And I grew up in the Boston area. I was really admiring like the work of Red Auerbach, what he did with the Boston Celtics. And that's really what I want to do. And, you know, I tell, you know, another lesson is, you know, for me, it was just unbelievable luck. And I know how fortunate I've been and how I feel like that's a responsibility to give back. But for 75 years, there was no salary cap in the NFL. And then I was in the one law school in a town that the one team was the football team. And that's when the salary cap started. So I put together a book after working for a year and a half as an intern for the Saints, sent it out to 60 people in the NFL, every coach and GM. I got 59 rejection letters, and Coach Belichick hired me after law school, and away we went.
So you had those internships, of course, which are big ones. How did you get that first internship there with the Browns, working under Mike Lombardi on Belichick's staff? Because I would think the first job, internship or not, is probably the hardest one to get into.
Yeah, you know, Nick, I would tell you the next step's always the hardest one, you know, whatever that may be. And, you know, for me, and again, like sitting here in 2023 for people listening to your podcast, guys, like what I would say is like, for me, it was the salary cap. I was able to learn the cap, create value, understand it. And what I would say is like, what is going on now in the world where you could become an expert faster, meaning the barriers to entry are a little bit lower, less competitive. So maybe it's going to be the first professional team to pay in cryptocurrency, or how would you put an NFL team in Europe? I mean, there's a gazillion things, right? Like what's going to be the first professional, you know, league to say like, you know, we're going to stream everything, and, you know, like there's a million things going on in the world of sports right now. So to me, it's about creating value and distinguishing yourself.
Absolutely. Make a great point. London already has an NFL game a couple times a year. The Jaguars are always kind of rumblings there about them being in London. You have Mexico City, you have Toronto. So there are a couple of international points of entry for the NFL. But you being a Northeast guy, Boston kid, you spent the 1996 season with the Saints. Talked about that briefly. What was it like being down there? Was it different, obviously, than how you grew up?
Yeah, New Orleans is an interesting town, guys. I love it. It's really like France. There's a lot of influence from like Paris, and not to get too technical, but 49 states in our country practice the common law, which is really the law that's based in England, which is common law. And then the civil code, which is like also known as the Napoleonic Code, which comes from France, parts of Europe, is about there's a code, and that's how you sort of like can represent yourself. And Tulane drew people from all over the country because they had two different curriculums. But I really like the culture and the people in New Orleans. That city has a lot of meaning to me.
So you were player personnel assistant down there, and then very quickly after you joined the New York Jets. So you decided to be the director of player contacts there. At that period of time, Bill Parcells was there. So what was the process like getting yourself from the Saints to the Jets? Was anybody instrumental in that? And how many times did you get to interact with Parcells prior to joining the Jets, and then once you got there?
Joe, that's a really, really good question. And like what I'm about to tell you, like is pretty unbelievable. Like in this day and age, he actually offered me the job before we ever met. Never talked to him. Grew up in the Northeast, big sports fan. Saw Coach Parcells, scared to death of him, to be candid. Very intimidated by him. And I worked for Coach Belichick in the Browns at 95. Coach Belichick, after the Browns, went to the Patriots in 96. And I went back to the Saints. And when Coach Parcells became the head coach and GM of the Jets, he wanted somebody to help him with the salary cap. And Belichick's like, I got just the guy for you. So it was Belichick's recommendation that got me the job. And he offered it to me. It was crazy.
It's a wild story, but it's a lot of work. I mean, I still don't understand why if you trade a player, you get dead cap. It's just so confusing. How did you master the cap, and how do you keep knowing what's going on as it changes every single season or CBA?
Nick, I would tell you the same thing about like any profession. Like I look at a company like NVIDIA. I'm like, how in the world do they make a chip? Like, how would you even begin to do that? I would have no idea, right? And there's like that lesson out there about 10,000 hours and how do you become an expert in something. And like for me, it was just day by day. And like to me, it's like sort of like something I understand because I've done it so much. So I would just say like it's anything complex or anything that takes a while to master. I see that as like an opportunity because it becomes a little bit of a moat. And I don't think there's, at least for me, because I one of the things that like I get up every day, like the best is yet to come, and I'm going to outwork you just today. Like I'm always going, and I know there's a lot more talented people. And I sometimes say to myself, and this is like crazy, but like I say like the schlep and the pain, not the pain, but the schlep and the process is my moat. Like you hear a lot like an investment term when you're looking at a company, like how big is their moat? Like how big is it for their competition come in? And I look to my left and my right, and I see a lot of people that are smarter than me and more talented, but like no one's ever outworked me. So like that's my moat.
There you go. Hard work pays off. So during this time here with the Jets, I'm very curious, when's the first time you met Mike Francesa, and how did your friendship develop over the years?
Yeah, Mike's always been really great to me, like a special guy. I mean, here's a Hall of Famer that had no absolutely reason to be nice to me, and he was so kind. I think it was 1998. I spent like the first year just earning Coach Parcells' trust, and Mike Francesa was broadcasting from Hofstra University where we had training camp, and Parcells was like, I'm going to put you on with this guy. And it was like, I went from like talking about learning how to drive a car in the left-hand lane. Like, I was scared. And, the word I think of Mike Francesa, for me, and I'm not saying how he's treated others, and that's none of my business or anything, like, but it's like unbelievable kindness. Like he's always been incredibly kind to me, guys.
So there's this process. Once you get to the Jets, again, like I said, you started director of player contacts. You were there for about a couple of years. Then you moved to director of player development, and then assistant general manager, and eventually general manager, right? So walk us through what the typical process is like working for an NFL team, working your way through the ranks. And ultimately, how did you react when you were finally given the general manager job, the New York Jets, the general manager job that you had always wanted your whole life?
Yeah, it was great. I'll never forget it. I was sitting on Rumson Avenue on a Saturday morning, and Woody Johnson called me up, and I'll never forget where I was. I pulled over on the side of the road, and he goes, "Hey, I want to make you the GM of the team." And those are calls like you never forget. And the other call I'll never forget in my career, candidly, was driving home from the Jets facility, and I was driving home. I got a call from Ron Wolf. Ron's a legendary Hall of Fame GM, been with the Packers for 1,000 years, one of my idols. And we had just made the playoffs. He called me up and goes, "Congratulations. Like, nobody knows how hard these jobs are except the other GMs, and you're doing a heck of a job." And like, that was worth everything to me, to have like peer like acknowledgement. And it was really more of like a hero acknowledgement. So there's a few calls in your life that just change, and those were probably two of the most meaningful calls I got from outside of a relative. And Woody was awesome. Got a chance to work for him for 16 years. I've said this 100 times on the record, off the record, but when the New York Jets don't have a good season, it's on the people that are running the team, coaching the team, myself included, because he gives absolutely every resource possible to make that franchise successful. And it begins with the building. He built it. It was state of the art. It was ahead of its time. A lot of facilities have caught up to where it is, but from a player experience, it's truly second to none. It's in a very special place in Morris County, New Jersey, which is somewhat rural, and you have great proximity to New York City. And when you're a GM of a team, guys, like, every day is going to be different. And one of the frustrations for me, and I will tell you, like, when I became the GM, Coach Mangini became the head coach, he was much more prepared for his job than I was for mine. And it took me about a year and a half for the day to slow down. And one of the tough things about being a GM is you like are dealing with other people's problems. So, I want to come in and talk to Nick and Joe at 9:30, but the trainer's coming in and our left tackle has a sprained ankle. Like, well, just tell Nick and Joe, "I'm sorry, but I can't make it." Like, those are the things that are constantly evolving every day when you're a GM.
So really, if you think about it, within 10 years of you working in the NFL, you worked your way up to your ultimate goals. So that's really quick moving there. And you mentioned the facility, which we all know about, ahead of its time, and its proximity to Manhattan. So when you were doing free agency, did you ever use that pitch on some players like, "Hey, you're close to Manhattan"? Was that ever factored into your discussions?
I think the most underrated aspect of being a good recruiter is being a good listener. And, to be candid, Nick, absolutely, on some players, and others that would have scared them away. So you got to understand what's important to them and then try to adjust your approach. But absolutely, yeah, it's the greatest thing in the world.
For sure. So when you were there for a long time, you saw a lot of great moments, a lot of great press conferences. Internally there with the Jets, what was the reaction to Herm Edwards' famous "you play to win the game" press conference?
Yeah, that was really funny. Look, Herm's, I get a chance to work with him at ESPN now. Very passionate man, very like authentic. He's the same guy every day. Like, I don't even know how old he is today, but he's in great shape, works out every day. Very disciplined, very honorable, has a lot of respect for the former players, the military. Like, he's a man's man. He speaks from the heart, and I think people really, appreciate that about him.
So the other great press conference, of course, which you were more involved in, was you hire Rex Ryan. He had a slam dunk press conference, and it's just great PR for you guys at that time. That, and then Hard Knocks, and of course the Jets not going to be back on Hard Knocks. So tell us about how that positive PR really helped maybe build things up within the building.
I think more than just the PR was like a confidence and belief that, hey, we could go compete with the Patriots. Like, we're not a rebuilding team. We could go win right now. And we needed that at the time, and he was the perfect man for the job.
Joined Priority Sports, oversaw coaching, broadcasting, and front office for the New York branch. Walk us through that.
Yep. I wanted to run my own team, guys. So I was able to partner with Priority Sports. And next thing you know, like, I'm working with Dan Quinn and a whole bunch of others. And in the 2015 NBA Finals, it's the Golden State Warriors against the Cleveland Cavaliers, and I'm representing both coaches, and it was unbelievable. David Blatt and Steve Kerr, and let me tell you something, like, they taught me a heck of a lot more than I could have taught them. So it was a blast. I learned a ton, and it was going great. And then, unfortunately for me, I just love football so much. I got a chance to run the Dolphins, and I left that business at that point. But it was very fulfilling, and like I said, I learned a ton.
Yeah, you got to the Dolphins in 2015. You spent a couple of years down there as the executive vice president of football operations. Were there any reservations about taking a second job back in the NFL? Were you waiting for the perfect opportunity, or did you just feel like it was a good enough opportunity and something right to continue your career moving?
Joe, for me, like, I have a lot of belief in the people I'm surrounded by, and I thought the Dolphins had a lot of good people in the front office. So I only brought one person with me, Terry Bradway, who was ironically the former GM of the Jets, and we got there and had immediate success, and got to the playoffs for the first time since Steve Ross had bought the team, and I knew the organization and, more importantly, the people in it.
And now, most recently, you founded the 33rd team, and you've been in a front office insider, broadcast analyst on ESPN now for 4 years. So what was the process like bringing people on with you and everybody else to do the 33rd team, walk our listeners and viewers through what you do there? And did you have any reservations, or were you nervous at all doing more television than you did previously?
Yeah, I was really nervous. I went in for my interview for ESPN, and I sit down with a gentleman who's now my boss, and I think I was in his office for maybe 8 minutes, and he goes like this, like, "Here, that's your schedule for today, and we'll let you know how you do. I'll call you at the end of the day." That was it. They throw you in the deep end. I'm like, "That's it? Like, that's it?" And they call it the Bristol Car Wash, and you go on 8 gazillion shows, like boom, 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 boom. And guys, like, I'm like, what? Like, that, the interview, like, if it was 8 minutes, it was a long time. Here you go. We'll call you, let you know how you do. Like, they just throw you in and see what happens. So, but I love the 33rd team, guys. Like, I think it's really important to help others get to where they want to go. So we started really, it was initially as a think tank, not for profit. We've evolved into a media company. But, one of the gaps in the marketplace, to be candid, is you have wonderful people and coaches like a Dan Quinn and Doug Peterson. They get let go. They're going to go back in. And then you have all these young men and women like, I want to get involved in sports. I want to get involved with sports. And all we did is do this. And we took that young man or woman and said, hey, Dan Quinn, here's somebody that's going to help you get ready. Hey, Doug Peterson. And as this is happening, this is when the pandemic hits. So it's sort of like normalized, like the conversation the three of us are having right now, like, okay, you could be, doing this and it's normal. And it just kind of took off from there. We've placed 28 men and women in the NFL with full-time jobs with benefits because of the experience they got with us. We got 2 fantastic investors, and really excited. And for the listeners, you go to 33rdteam.com. That's 33rdteam.com. We have a completely free newsletter. All our content's completely free. And if you love football and you want to learn, check out our site.
Joe, stick with Mike. He'll be working in the NFL in no time, where you belong. Mike, what would you say in your life, your career has been your I'm right moment? What I mean by that is a time or place where you wanted to pursue something. You asked somebody for advice. They said, Mike, don't do that. That's an awful idea. And you were like, you know what? I'm going to do it anyway. And ultimately, you will see why it is that I'm right.
I love that. It was my folks. It was spring of 1991. I had a job in accounting, and I quit. I said, I'm not taking the job. They're like, and they drove. I lived about an hour and a half from home at UMass. And they're like, we paid for college. You're going to graduate with no debt. But if you have this crazy dream of, working in sports, like, you're on your own. I'm like, I got it.
Tremendous. Last question for me, Mike. When you were with the Jets and the Dolphins, can you just walk us through what your game day looked like?
Yeah, I try to work out as hard as possible early in the morning, because it was going to be eating a lot of calories of stress. I'm not a big drinker. I've never smoked. But boy, can I eat when I get nervous. So game day was really hard for me because, 2 kids at home, 53 in the office. You love them all. You want to win. And so I would work out really, really hard. And if we won on a home game, It was a celebratory dinner. It was a steakhouse on Long Island that we call when we were on the lower level of the GW Bridge. Brian and Cooper was ready for us when we got there. It's Mateo's in Florida. I can tell you the exact order after every win and the losses, like we just went home and had soup.
Mike, we thank you for your time. We really, really appreciate it. You have something in common with Nick and I. I was born on July 4th. He was born on Memorial Day, May 25th. You were also born on a holiday, Valentine's Day. So that must be great in your house. But we wish you the best moving forward. And once again, thank you for doing this with us. It's like what we do is we always give our guests the last word. So if there's anything else you would like to share, promote, but obviously you have the 33rd team. But if there's anything else that comes to mind, please go ahead and share. Thanks again.
No, I just appreciate you guys having me on. Keep up the great work. I know you guys are very passionate, and I'm fans of people who are passionate like you. So really appreciate it, guys. And thanks so much for having me.
That's going to do it here for this episode of You Know I'm Right. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. T. So for our very special guest, Mike Tannenbaum, and my co-host, Joe Calabrese, I'm Nick Durst, and this has been You Know I'm Right.